Welcome back. The courts once again are pushing back on the Trump administration this morning. A federal judge ruling yesterday that the Trump administration must temporarily return displays that discuss George Washington's ownership of slaves to Washington's former home in Philadelphia. The preliminary injunction comes after the city of Philadelphia sued the Interior Department and the National Park Service after they removed the displays last month. Want to bring in Bloomberg White House correspondent Jeff Mason, also with us Democratic strategist Basil Smikle and Republican strategist Susan Del Percio, both thankfully are MS Now political analysts. So Jeff, I'll start with you here on set with this ruling. The judge writing in part, quote, as if the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984 now existed. With its motto, ignorance is strength, this court is now asked to determine whether the federal government has the power it claims to disassemble historical truths when it has some domain over historical facts. That's just part of what Judge Roth wrote, ending with, it does not. The fact that a judge is invoking 1984, I think, in this political moment might speak to some folks who are already pretty freaked out by some of the things that they've seen from this administration. And yet, how is the Trump administration responding?
So far, not really saying much, but I think you're right to start by focusing on that. And also worth noting that the judge was appointed by Republican President George W. Bush.
Yeah.
And then citing this dystopian novel as a way of expressing, A, the outrage, but B, that the Trump administration did not have the legal right to do this. And it is sort of in line generally with something that the Trump administration and President Trump with that executive order has wanted to do, which is just to make things look nicer about U.S. history, even though there are parts about U.S. history which obviously don't look so nice. Yeah. And that's not something that he's happy to talk about.
I even think back to our President's Day coverage, the ways that we talk about presidents who were great, but also had some not great moments. I mean, this is humanity at its finest. We have our good moments, our bad moments, and we have to engage with all of them in order to move forward and make progress. And yet, Basil, this administration's push to remove parts of the nation's history, reinstall other things like Confederate statues. I mean, what does it all say about where we are and the kind of America that they're driving toward?
Well, it's not just what we say now. It's actually something that I was taught even when I was in elementary school, that history is written by the winners. So Donald Trump is using the executive authority, skirting the law or disobeying the law to engage in this kind of activity, the ripping down of monuments, of these plaques and narratives about America's history. But I also want to make a point that I think is equally, if not more important, that we're talking about plaques and monuments being taken down, but we also need to remember that this is also being mirrored in textbooks. This is being mirrored in classrooms with teachers and lesson plans from K-12 to higher education. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but I'm glad that the judges are stepping in, even going so far as to using Orwell as an example. But this is the president trying to write a narrative that isn't America's narrative, but it's his narrative, and that is important to get across.
I think you're exactly right to take this one example and pull it out even further into the macro landscape, because, Susan, we've also seen the Trump administration, in addition to this, lead culture wars against books, museums, even going so far as demanding Stonewall, the very birthplace of the modern LGBTQ plus movement, remove its pride flag. I mean, New York officials have put it back, but what kind of backlash do they risk here? And is there any political advantage to be gained by Democrats in moments like this for standing up and saying, well, no, we don't need to whitewash parts of our history or remove it from textbooks or the national consciousness. We have to remember all parts of our history.
Well, of course, Democrats would be right to condone the president's behavior on these issues. However, what's interesting is the lack of Republican support, at least vocal support, and in some cases, going against the president. And one of the reasons why we're seeing that, and I'm just speaking through a political lens here, is because the president is so much weaker today than he was a year ago. And that Republicans can't bear the brunt of his negative poll numbers anymore. So they have to find ways which are more than appropriate for them to speak out against the president. And I think this is a cumulative effect. Like, let's not think about in the last 72 hours. We saw a judge dress down Pete Hegseth for what he did against Senator Mark Kelly. We saw Jeanine Pirro get slammed by a grand jury for having absolutely not a leg to stand on for trying to indict members of the House and Senate. So what we're seeing here is that Trump may think he can rule like a dictator, but with bad poll numbers, he's not going to get any backing from fellow Republicans on these issues. And I think that may start to be a trend.